My name is Garrett Mitchell, 32 years old, and last month my family told me I would never amount to anything. The words stung as they laughed over wine and prime rib at our monthly dinner. If only they knew about my classified military career. The next day, I walked into my father's company in full uniform. When his boss saluted me and said, "Good morning, Colonel," their forks dropped to the floor. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to join me on this journey of family recognition. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living in the shadow of excellence. My father, Raymond Mitchell, built Mitchell Defense Contractors from the ground up, transforming it from a small engineering firm into one of the top military suppliers in the country. His office walls were lined with awards, certificates, and photos of him shaking hands with senators, generals, and even 2 presidents. In our family, achievement wasn't celebrated, it was expected. My mother, Cassandra, complemented his corporate success with her own brand of perfection. As the daughter of a prominent judge, she navigated social circles with practiced grace, hosting charity galas and sitting on 3 nonprofit boards. Her carefully curated life extended to her expectations for her children. She had a 5-year plan for each of us before we could even tie our shoes. Preston, my older brother by 3 years, was the golden child. National Merit Scholar, valedictorian, and graduated from Princeton with honors before earning his MBA from Wharton. He returned to work alongside our father, already being groomed to take over the company. At family gatherings, his achievements were announced like royal proclamations. Each new business deal or promotion met with approving nods. My younger sister Lindsay completed the family success trifecta. She was the athletic star, earning a full scholarship for swimming at Stanford while maintaining a 4.0 GPA in pre-med. Beautiful, charismatic, and driven. She had recently gotten engaged to a neurosurgeon she met during her hospital volunteer work. My mother couldn't have scripted it better. Then there was me, the middle child. From an early age, I struggled in the traditional classroom environment. Not because I wasn't smart, but because my mind worked differently. While Preston memorized formulas and Lindsay charmed her way through social hierarchies, I was the kid who dismantled the toaster to see how it worked, who spent hours creating elaborate tactical scenarios with my action figures, who asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. My report cards were a disappointment, with teachers noting I was bright but unfocused, and not living up to my potential. The standardized education system and I were mismatched from the start. What did capture my attention was anything military. I devoured books on strategy and military history. I spent hours studying maps and battle plans. When I was 13, my Uncle Frank, a retired Marine, gave me a book on Special Operations Forces. Something clicked. Here was a world where the skills I naturally possessed, adaptability, strategic thinking, quick decision-making under pressure, were valued. When I announced my intention to enlist after high school instead of attending college, you would have thought I had declared my plan to become a professional criminal. "Mitchells don't enlist," my father said flatly. "Mitchells run companies that supply the military. We don't join it." My mother was more dramatic. "I won't tell people my son is a soldier," she said, as if the word itself was distasteful. "What will I say at the club?" Preston, always the pragmatist, tried to redirect me. "The military could be fine for some people, but with our family connections, you could start much higher up if you just get your degree first." Lindsay, 16 at the time, was the only one who seemed curious rather than judgmental. "Will you get to jump out of planes?" she asked, earning a sharp look from our mother. Despite their unified opposition, I enlisted in the Army 2 weeks after graduation. The decision created a rift that would take years to bridge, if it ever fully would be. For 14 years, I'd built my career in the military, specifically in intelligence operations. I discovered that my unorthodox thinking patterns and ability to see connections others missed made me valuable in ways my family couldn't comprehend. I advanced through the ranks steadily, earning commendations I couldn't display and completing missions I couldn't discuss. The nature of my work required discretion. Many operations were classified, and my non-disclosure agreements were extensive. This secrecy, necessary for national security, became another barrier between my family and me. When asked about my work during holiday visits or the occasional phone call, I could only offer vague descriptions. "I'm doing government work," or "it's mostly administrative," became my standard responses, which only reinforced their perception that I had settled for mediocrity. My recent promotion to colonel came after a particularly complex intelligence operation that prevented a major security threat. The ceremony was attended by high-ranking officials who knew the details of what my team had accomplished. My family was not invited, partly due to security clearance issues, but also because I had stopped sharing significant moments with them years ago. They had decided who I was long before I discovered who I could be. In their narrative, I was the underachiever, the disappointment, the cautionary tale used to motivate younger cousins. "Study hard or you'll end up like Garrett." I maintained contact out of familial duty, attending monthly dinners when not deployed and sending appropriate gifts on birthdays and holidays. But I had built a life and identity completely separate from the Mitchell family legacy. I had found respect and purpose in a world they knew nothing about. And then came the dinner that would change everything. The Mitchell family dinner occurred on the last Sunday of every month at my parents' home in Westchester County. The 5-bedroom colonial sat on 2 manicured acres, a monument to my father's success and my mother's taste. I parked my modest Jeep Grand Cherokee between Preston's Tesla and Lindsay's Range Rover. The vehicle disparity a visible reminder of our different life choices. The dining room was a showcase of understated wealth. A crystal chandelier hung over a mahogany table set with Wedgwood china and sterling silver flatware that had belonged to my great-grandmother. The table could seat 12 comfortably, though tonight it would just be the 5 of us. Fresh flowers from my mother's garden formed an elegant centerpiece, and the smell of expensive candles mingled with the aroma of whatever gourmet meal was being prepared by Mariella, my parents' longtime housekeeper. "Garrett, you finally made it," my mother said as I entered, ere kissing my cheek. She stepped back, surveying my appearance with a critical eye. I was wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis, clean pressed, but not designer. "Couldn't you have worn something a bit more professional? Preston just came from a golf meeting with clients and still managed to dress properly." I glanced at my brother in his tailored pants and polo shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit. "I came straight from work, Mom. This is professional in my world." "And what world is that exactly?" Preston asked with a smirk, handing me a glass of whiskey. "The exciting world of government filing systems?" Before I could respond, Lindsay swept in, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she hugged me. "Don't be a jerk, Preston. Not everyone needs to wear a tie to feel important." My father emerged from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose and a tablet in hand. "Markets in Asia are opening strong," he announced to no one in particular before acknowledging my presence with a nod. "Garrett, glad you could make it this time." The implication that I frequently missed these dinners hung in the air, though I had only been absent when deployed, information I couldn't fully share. We moved to the dining table as Mariella brought out the first course, a butternut squash soup with truffle oil. My mother dominated the conversation with updates on her social committee and complaints about the new family that had moved in down the street. "They have no concept of appropriate landscaping," she said with a sigh. "And their children are always outside making noise. It's lowering property values, I'm sure of it." My father nodded absently, his attention on Preston. "Tell them about the new contract." Preston straightened, chest puffing slightly. "We just secured the Henderson account. $20 million for the first phase alone. with options for renewal that could triple that amount. That's my boy, my father said proudly. At this rate, you'll be running the place before I'm ready to retire. The conversation shifted to Lindsay's wedding plans and her fiancé's recent publication in a prestigious medical journal. My sister, to her credit, tried to include me by asking my opinion on potential honeymoon destinations. You've traveled for work, right, Garrett? Anywhere you'd recommend? Parts of Southeast Asia are beautiful, I offered. Thailand has amazing beaches if that's what you're looking for. My mother frowned. I didn't realize government clerks got sent to Thailand. It's not exactly a clerk position, Mom, I said carefully. I work in information analysis, and sometimes need to be on site. Information analysis, my father repeated skeptically. Sounds fancy for pushing papers. Preston laughed. Remember when Garrett used to say he was going to be a spy? I guess filing reports is as close as he got. The main course arrived, prime rib for everyone except Lindsay, who had requested fish. As Mariella served, my father began discussing his company's latest developments. We're finalizing a major contract with the Department of Defense next week, he announced. Some big brass coming to inspect the facilities. If all goes well, it could be our largest military contract to date. Which division? I asked, knowing full well it was the contract I would be overseeing tomorrow. Advanced Communications Systems, my father replied, surprised by my interest. Why? I shrugged. Just curious. Government work gives you insight into different projects. Preston snorted. Right. Your desk job gives you the inside scoop on multimillion-dollar military contracts. Speaking of careers, my mother interjected, turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Isn't it time you considered coming to work for your father? I'm sure he could find something suitable for you. Maybe in human resources? The suggestion, a thinly veiled insult, hung in the air. Human resources was where my father placed people he considered minimally competent but not suited for real responsibility. I'm satisfied with my career path, I said simply. Satisfied with mediocrity, my father muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Raymond, my mother chided without conviction. Everyone finds their level. Garrett has always been different. Different is one word for it, Preston added, though underachiever might be more accurate. Lindsay shot me an apologetic look but remained silent. You know, my mother continued, swirling her wine. The Henderson's son, you remember, the family that moved away to Connecticut? He was in a similar government position. Very basic work. But he just completed his MBA at night and has moved into private consulting. Making 6 figures now. Perhaps you could consider something like that? The implication was clear. My current career was a stepping stone at best, a dead end at worst. I'm actually doing important work, I said quietly. It matters. Important? My father laughed. Garrett, let's be realistic. Preston is handling multimillion-dollar accounts. Lindsay is marrying a brain surgeon and will probably cure cancer herself someday. And you're what? Filing reports that no one reads in some government basement. The dismissal stung, but years of military discipline kept my expression neutral. You'll never be anything compared to your siblings, my mother said, the wine loosening her usual social restraint. And that's okay, dear. Not everyone is meant for greatness. The table erupted in laughter, my father's booming. Preston's smug chuckle, even my mother's delicate titter. Only Lindsay abstained, looking down at her plate. In that moment, I felt a familiar hollowness, the space where family support should have been. After 14 years of service, multiple combat deployments, and a recent promotion that recognized my exceptional contributions to national security, I was still the family disappointment. I could have broken my silence then. I could have mentioned the silver star in my apartment safe, or the personal commendation from the Joint Chiefs, or my recent promotion. I could have told them that the basic government position they mocked had me managing operations that directly protected American lives, including theirs. But I didn't. Partly because of security clearances, but mostly because I realized it shouldn't matter. Their approval, or lack thereof, had stopped defining me long ago. I need to head out, I said, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten meal. Early meeting tomorrow. Of course you do, Preston smirked. Those reports won't file themselves. As I drove away from my parents' house, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow, when I walked into Mitchell Defense Contractors as Colonel Garrett Mitchell, USMC, leading the inspection team for the contract my father so desperately wanted, the family narrative would finally be rewritten, whether they were ready for it or not. My apartment in Arlington was a stark contrast to my parents' ornate home. Clean lines, minimal furnishings, practical layout, habits formed through years of military life. The living room featured just 2 personal touches. A shadow box containing my grandfather's World War II medals, the only family member who might have understood my path, and a small collection of stones gathered from various deployment locations, Remy. News of places I couldn't discuss and missions that would never make headlines. As I hung my jacket in the closet, I caught sight of my dress uniform, pressed and ready for tomorrow's inspection. The silver eagle of a full colonel gleamed on the shoulder boards, a rank achieved at an unusually young age. The result of accelerated promotions through combat leadership and specialized intelligence work. Pouring a single finger of bourbon, I settled into my armchair and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. 14 years compressed into a mental highlight reel. Basic training had been the first time I truly excelled at something. The physical challenges pushed me but never broke me. The tactical problems engaged my mind in ways classroom learning never had. For the first time, my way of thinking, quick, adaptive, unconventional, was an asset rather than a liability. Mitchell, my drill sergeant had said in a rare moment of approval, "You've got a weird brain, but it works." After completing my initial training with distinction, I was recruited for intelligence operations. My aptitude test had revealed a unique combination of skills: pattern recognition, language acquisition, stress resilience, and what one evaluator called creative problem solving under duress. The specialized training that followed was grueling, physically, mentally, emotionally. Many candidates washed out, unable to meet the increasingly demanding standards. I thrived on the challenge, finishing second in my class of 37, 29 of whom had college degrees. My first deployment came sooner than expected. A situation in Eastern Europe required personnel with my specific skill set. The mission details remained classified, but it involved extracting an asset with critical information while navigating complex local politics and hostile territory. When our primary extraction route was compromised, I identified an alternative that hadn't been considered, a route that ultimately saved both the asset and the team. Captain Lawrence, my commanding officer at the time, had pulled me aside afterward. "Mitchell, most officers would have followed protocol and aborted. Your solution was unorthodox but effective. That's the kind of thinking we need." That mission established my reputation as someone who could improvise successfully when standard approaches failed. Over the next decade, I was deployed to increasingly sensitive operations across 3 continents, working with joint special operations teams and international partners. Each mission built upon the last, each success earning more responsibility. I rose from lieutenant to captain to major, collecting commendations that remained in classified personnel files rather than on my parents' mantle. Along the way, I found mentors who saw what my family never had. Colonel Winters, who guided my officer development. Major Garcia, who taught me the nuances of cross-cultural intelligence gathering. Captain Reeves, whose experience in signals intelligence complemented my human intelligence background. These men and women became my true family in many ways. People who valued my contributions and understood the sacrifices the job required. We celebrated each other's promotions with quiet toasts rather than elaborate dinners. Acknowledged achievements with firm handshakes rather than social announcements. The operation that led to my promotion to colonel had been the most complex of my career. A sophisticated network of information brokers was selling military technology secrets to multiple hostile nations. The investigation spanned 18 months, involving intelligence agencies from 3 allied countries and requiring deep cover operations. I led a team of 12 specialists, coordinating efforts across multiple time zones and jurisdictions. When one of our undercover operatives was compromised, I made the call to accelerate the timeline, organizing a simultaneous takedown of key network nodes in 3 different countries. The operation succeeded beyond expectations. We recovered stolen data before it could be implemented, identified previously unknown security vulnerabilities, and provided evidence leading to 27 arrests. Most importantly, we prevented next-generation defensive systems from being compromised. The subsequent debriefing at the Pentagon included generals and intelligence directors who rarely attended such sessions. The Joint Chiefs representative had been uncharacteristically effusive. Colonel Mitchell, your team's work has prevented incalculable damage to national security. The President has been briefed personally on your operation's success. The promotion to colonel followed, along with expanded responsibilities overseeing military contract security and implementation, which directly led to my assignment reviewing Mitchell Defense Contractor's new communications system. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of dismissing my military career, my father's company would now be subject to my professional evaluation. His contract's approval would partially depend on my assessment. My phone buzzed, interrupting my reflections. A text from Colonel Barnes, my immediate superior. Briefing packet updated for tomorrow's inspection. New information on subcontractors. Review before 0800. I opened my laptop and accessed the secure server. Reviewing the additional documentation on Mitchell Defense's proposed communications system. The technical specifications were impressive. My father's company did excellent work, despite my personal feelings about its leadership. As I studied the materials, I considered how to approach tomorrow's inspection. The professional path was clear. I would evaluate the contract based solely on its merits, neither favoring nor penalizing the company because of my relationship with its CEO. My personal feelings were irrelevant to national security interests. Still, I couldn't deny a very human anticipation of the moment when Raymond Mitchell would realize that his underachieving son would be evaluating his company's most significant military contract to date. I closed the briefing documents and laid out my dress uniform for the morning. Tomorrow would be a turning point, not just for Mitchell Defense Contractors, but for the Mitchell family itself. The Mitchell Defense Contractors headquarters occupied a sleek glass and steel building in Northern Virginia, close enough to the Pentagon to facilitate regular meetings but far enough to maintain a distinct corporate identity. I'd driven past it many times but had never entered. My father had never invited me to see his professional world, and I had never asked. At 0745, our convoy of 3 government vehicles pulled into the visitors' parking area. I sat in the lead SUV alongside Colonel Barnes and Major Wilson, with 2 technical specialists in each of the following vehicles. All of us wore dress uniforms, standard protocol for formal inspections of this nature. As I stepped out, adjusting my cover and straightening my jacket, I felt the weight of my rank insignia. The silver eagle on each shoulder represented not just authority but responsibility, to my country, to the troops who would rely on this equipment, and to the mission we served. Personal history had no place in that equation. Colonel Mitchell, Barnes said quietly as we approached the entrance. Given your family connection, I can take lead if you prefer. I appreciated the offer but shook my head. No need, sir. I can maintain objectivity. The security desk processed our clearances efficiently. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at my name but made no comment as she issued visitor badges and contacted our escort. Warren Blake, CEO of Mitchell Defense and my father's boss, emerged from the elevator himself rather than sending an assistant, a sign of the contract's importance. Blake was a tall, imposing figure with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. I had met him briefly at corporate events my father had hosted at our home years ago, though I doubted he would remember the teenage son who hovered at the edges of such gatherings. His eyes scanned our group, recognition flashing when he saw me. If he was surprised, he hid it well. "Gentlemen, welcome to Mitchell Defense," he said, extending his hand first to Colonel Barnes, then to me. "Colonel Mitchell, I wasn't aware you were part of the inspection team." A pleasant surprise. "Mr. Blake?" I acknowledged with a professional nod. "We have the conference room prepared for your initial briefing." Blake continued. "The technical team will join us shortly, including our chief engineer and," he paused almost imperceptibly, "our COO, Raymond Mitchell." We followed Blake to a large conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac. The table was arranged with presentation materials, technical specifications, and prototype components of the communications system under review. Our team took positions on one side of the table while Blake made small talk about traffic and weather. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and several Mitchell Defense executives entered, my father among them. He was engaged in conversation with the chief technical officer and didn't immediately look toward the government representatives. When he did, his eyes passed over me before snapping back, his sentence trailing off midword. The blood drained from his face so rapidly I momentarily worried about his health. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The other executives, unaware of the dynamic at play, continued to take their seats. Warren Blake, either oblivious to my father's shock or professional enough to ignore it, began the introductions. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce our inspection team. Colonel James Barnes, Colonel Garrett Mitchell, Major David Wilson, and their technical specialists." My father had recovered enough to attempt speech. "Garrett? What are you?" Blake interrupted, his expression showing surprise. "Raymond, you didn't mention your son was the Colonel Mitchell who would be leading the communications security review." What a remarkable coincidence. I wasn't aware. My father managed, his voice strained. Blake turned to the other executives. "For those of you who don't know, Colonel Mitchell has developed quite a reputation in military intelligence circles. His expertise in communications security is one reason we're honored to have him leading this inspection." He nodded respectfully in my direction. "Good morning, Colonel Mitchell. It's an honor to have you inspect our facility." The other executives murmured greetings, several looking between my father and me with curiosity. My father remained silent, his expression a complex mixture of confusion, disbelief, and what might have been the first glimmer of reassessment. "Thank you, Mr. Blake," I responded formally. "We're here to ensure the proposed systems meet all security and functionality requirements for field deployment. Shall we begin the technical overview?" For the next 3 hours, we conducted a thorough review of the communications system specifications. I asked pointed questions about encryption protocols, vulnerability testing, and field durability. The Mitchell Defense technical team was well prepared and responsive, clearly proud of their design innovations. Throughout the presentation, my father remained uncharacteristically quiet, letting his technical staff handle most explanations. His eyes frequently returned to my uniform, to the silver eagle on my shoulders, as if trying to reconcile this reality with the narrative he had constructed over the past 14 years. When we broke for lunch, Blake suggested a tour of the production facilities. "Colonel Mitchell, perhaps you'd like to see where the prototype assembly takes place? Raymond can show you the specialized testing environment we've created." My father nodded stiffly. "Of course. This way, Colonel." As we walked slightly ahead of the others, my father finally spoke directly to me. "You could have said something. Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. He had no answer for that. The production floor was impressive, clean, organized, with state-of-the-art equipment and clear security protocols. Under different circumstances, I might have felt pride in my father's accomplishments. As it was, I maintained professional distance, evaluating each station against military requirements. "This is our environmental testing chamber," my father explained, gesturing to a large sealed room. "We can simulate extreme conditions: Arctic cold, desert heat, high humidity, dust storms, to ensure the communication units maintain functionality." "What about EMP resistance?" I asked, referring to electromagnetic pulse threats that could disable electronic equipment. "We've developed a proprietary shielding system," he replied, some of his confidence returning as he moved into technical territory. "It exceeds military requirements by 23%. "I'd like to see the test results," I said. "Of course." He paused, then added, "Your technical background is more extensive than I realized." "Yes," I said simply. "It is." As the tour continued, I noticed my father watching me interact with his team. I asked informed questions that demonstrated my understanding of the technologies involved. I provided feedback that reflected my field experience with similar systems. With each exchange, the narrative he had constructed about me visibly crumbled. When we returned to the conference room for final discussions, the dynamic had shifted subtly. Blake and the other executives now directed technical questions to me rather than Colonel Barnes. Recognizing my expertise in this specific area, my father watched this realignment with an expression I couldn't fully interpret, something between professional respect and personal bewilderment. As the inspection concluded, Blake shook my hand firmly. "Colonel Mitchell, your insights today have been invaluable. We'll address the encryption vulnerability you identified immediately." "The system is impressive overall," I acknowledged. "With those adjustments, I believe it will serve our forces effectively." "High praise from Colonel Mitchell," Blake said to the room at large. "His standards are legendary in certain circles." My father's eyebrows rose slightly at this description. I maintained a neutral expression, but I couldn't deny a small satisfaction at seeing his worldview so thoroughly disrupted. As we prepared to depart, my father approached me. "Garrett, Colonel, perhaps we could speak privately for a moment?" "I'm afraid we're on a tight schedule," I replied. "We have another inspection this afternoon. Perhaps another time." It was a small retribution for years of dismissal, but I allowed myself this one moment. The roles had reversed. Now I was the one too busy with important work to make time for him. "Of course," he said, looking strangely lost despite standing in the building that represented his life's achievement. "Another time." As our convoy pulled away from Mitchell Defense Contractors, Colonel Barnes glanced at me. "That went well professionally." "Personally?" "Complicated, sir," I replied. "Family usually is." He nodded. "But that look on your father's face when Blake called you Colonel? Worth framing." For the first time that day, I allowed myself a smile. The aftermath began with a phone call at 7:36 that evening. I had just returned to my apartment after completing our second inspection of the day when my cell phone displayed Raymond Mitchell on the screen. I let it ring 3 times, contemplating whether to answer, before accepting the call. "Hello, Father." "Garrett." His voice sounded different, tentative, perhaps even humbled. "I think we need to talk." "Yes." "I imagine we do." A pause stretched between us, 14 years of misunderstanding filling the silence. "Colonel," he finally said, testing the word. "A full colonel. At your age." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell us?" The question carried layers of meaning. Why hadn't I shared my promotions, my achievements, my actual work? The answer was equally complex. Would it have mattered? I asked. Or would it have been dismissed as playing soldier? He had no immediate response to that. I could almost hear him recalibrating decades of assumptions. "Your mother would like to speak with you," he said finally, an uncharacteristic retreat. My mother's voice came through, high and slightly breathless. Garrett, darling. We had no idea. A colonel! In charge of such important matters. Her tone held the familiar notes of social calculation, already revising the narrative she would share with friends. Transforming me from family disappointment to prestigious military leader. It's just my job, Mother. But such an important one. Why? Warren Blake was absolutely singing your praises to your father. Said you're highly respected in Washington circles. That you've done classified work that's been recognized at the highest levels. The same achievements she had dismissed just yesterday were now being reframed as family pride points. The hypocrisy was both expected and disappointing. We should have dinner this week. She continued, not waiting for my response. Just the family. Preston and Lindsay are dying to hear about your real work. I doubted Preston was dying to hear anything about my career. But I agreed to Sunday dinner, 5 days away. It would give everyone time to process this new reality. After ending the call, I wasn't surprised when my phone immediately rang again. Preston. A colonel? He demanded without preamble. Since when? Good evening to you too, Preston. Cut the crap, Garrett. You humiliated Dad today. You could have given him some warning. Of course that would be his concern, our father's pride rather than his own misconceptions. The inspection was classified until yesterday, I said, which was partially true. And frankly, given the family's opinion of my career, would advance notice have made any difference? That's not fair. How were we supposed to know you were doing anything significant when you never talked about it? You never asked? I replied simply. You all decided I was a failure and stopped being curious about my life. That silenced him momentarily. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted. So, intelligence work? That's what you've been doing all this time. Among other things. Is that why you never talk about your job? Security clearances and all that? Partly. He exhaled heavily. Mom's freaking out. Already telling her friends her son the colonel is advising the Pentagon. That's an exaggeration. Is it? He sounded genuinely curious now. Blake said you've briefed generals. This conversation is veering into classified territory, Preston. Right. Of course. Another pause. Sunday dinner is going to be interesting. That's one word for it. After Preston, Lindsay called. Her approach was characteristically different. Hey, Colonel brother, she said, her tone light but sincere. So you've been a secret badass all this time. Despite everything, I smiled. Lindsay had always been the least judgmental family member. Not so secret to the people who needed to know. I feel terrible, she admitted. All those times we listened to Mom and Dad talk about your government job like it was filing paperwork. You never joined in. I acknowledged. Still should have defended you more. She paused. Were you ever going to tell us? Honestly? I don't know. After a certain point, it seemed easier to keep the world separate. Well, you certainly made an entrance. Dad looked shell-shocked when he called me. Not my intention. Wasn't it? Even a little? I could hear the smile in her voice. Maybe a little. I conceded. Good. They deserved it. Her frankness surprised me. See you Sunday. And Garrett? I'm proud of you. Always have been, even when I didn't know I should be even prouder. Her words affected me more than I expected. Perhaps not all family bonds were irreparably damaged. Sunday arrived with unusual tension. The familiar drive to my parents' house felt different. I was returning not as the disappointment but as someone they were now trying to understand, perhaps even impress. The dynamics were immediately apparent. My mother had prepared my favorite meal from childhood, roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, something she hadn't done since I was in high school. My father had opened an expensive bottle of scotch. Preston was uncharacteristically subdued, and Lindsay watched everything with anthropological interest. Garrett, Colonel, Would you like to sit at the head of the table? My father offered as we gathered for dinner. That's your seat, Dad. I'm fine where I always sit. He nodded, almost looking relieved at maintaining this small piece of the established order. As we settled in, my mother launched into what seemed like a rehearsed speech. Garrett, we owe you an apology. We clearly misjudged your career path and achievements. If we had known. That's just it, isn't it? I interrupted gently. The apology is because you now know I've achieved rank and recognition. Would you be apologizing if I were still a lieutenant doing important but unrecognized work? Her expression confirmed what I already knew. The apology wasn't for dismissing me, but for dismissing someone who turned out to be important. That's not fair, my father interjected. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I corrected. You've wanted what aligned with your definition of success. When my path didn't match that definition, you decided it wasn't valid. Preston shifted uncomfortably. Come on, Garrett. We're trying here. Are you? Or are you just reassessing my value now that you know my rank? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Lindsay broke it with characteristic directness. He's right, she said. We've been awful. All of us. We decided Garrett wasn't successful because he wasn't following Dad's path or getting rich or becoming famous. We never bothered to understand what he was actually doing. My mother looked stricken. We didn't have all the information. Because you never asked the right questions. Lindsay replied before I could. You asked about his salary and his title, but never about whether his work mattered or made him happy. My father, unaccustomed to family descent, attempted to regain control of the conversation. The point is, we know now. And we're proud of you, son. Colonel, at your age, it's remarkable. Blake says you're on track for general if you stay in. That's not the point either, I said quietly. My rank isn't what makes my work valuable. I was doing important things as a lieutenant, as a captain, as a major. The value was in the work itself, not the recognition. My mother reached for her wine glass, her hand trembling slightly. I don't understand what you want from us, Garrett. It was a fair question. What did I want? Validation? Too late for that. Understanding? Perhaps impossible given our different worldviews. I want you to consider that your metrics for measuring a life's worth might be incomplete, I finally said. That's all. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that. Lindsay's wedding plans, a neutral discussion of the communications contract, the non-classified aspects, community news. The tension remained, but beneath it ran a current of reassessment. Old patterns were being questioned, if not yet changed. As I prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside in his study, the inner sanctum where he had always conducted important family business. Why didn't you ever correct us? He asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. All those times we assumed you were just pushing papers. Why let us believe that? I considered the question carefully. Partly security clearances. Partly because I stopped needing your approval. And partly because I realized that if I had to explain my worth to you, you'd never truly see it. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I've missed knowing my own son. Yes, I agreed. You have. Can we start over? He asked, vulnerability replacing his usual authority. Not over, I said, but maybe forward. Differently. As I drove away from my parents' house, I felt neither triumph nor vindication. The family's shock and recalibration weren't a victory, just a painful first step towards something that might eventually become authentic understanding. The weeks following the revelation brought a flurry of family activity, calls, texts, invitations. My parents, particularly my mother, seemed determined to make up for lost time through sheer persistence. Each contact carried an undercurrent of urgent recalibration, as if they could retroactively correct years of misunderstanding through concentrated attention now. My father's approach was characteristically practical. He began including me in business discussions, sending emails about Mitchell Defense's projects with notes like, "Would value your perspective on this," or, "Does this align with what you're seeing in the field?" His attempts at professional connection were easier to navigate than the more emotional outreach from my mother. Cassandra Mitchell had apparently updated her social narrative overnight. Suddenly, her middle child was not the family disappointment but my son, the colonel, and Garrett, who does classified work for the Pentagon. She called 3 times in the first week. Each conversation an awkward mixture of probing questions about my work, most of which I couldn't answer, and information about which family friends she had updated about my impressive career. The Hendersons were absolutely stunned. She reported with obvious satisfaction. "Their son is only a GS-12, you know. Not even close to your level of responsibility. Mom, my work isn't about status competition with the neighbors' kids." "Of course not, dear. I'm just saying people are impressed. As they should be." Preston's adjustment was more complex. Our relationship had always been defined by his position as the successful elder brother. With that dynamic disrupted, he seemed unsure how to relate to me. His initial texts were tentative, almost apologetic, but gradually shifted toward professional curiosity. "Dad mentioned you flagged an encryption vulnerability in our new system. Engineering team says your insight potentially saved millions in post-deployment fixes." It was the closest he could come to acknowledging my competence, through the familiar lens of business impact. Lindsay, true to form, adapted most naturally. She invited me to coffee, asked thoughtful questions about my career path, and listened to the parts one could share without pressing for classified details. "I always knew you were smart," she said during one of our meetings. "Just not like the rest of us. Your brain works differently, connects things in ways mine never would. The military values that kind of thinking in ways traditional education often doesn't." I explained. "I get that now." She hesitated. "Mom wants to invite your military friends to my wedding. Is that something you'd be comfortable with?" The question revealed both my mother's ongoing status consciousness and Lindsay's more genuine interest in integrating the previously separate parts of my life. "I'd like to invite a few colleagues," I said. "But let's not make it a military showcase, okay?" She laughed. "Noted. No dress uniform requirement." 3 weeks after the Mitchell Defense inspection, my father requested a dinner, just the 2 of us. We met at a steakhouse in Arlington, neutral territory away from family dynamics. After ordering, he got straight to the point. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, "about how little I know about your life and career. About why that happened." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I had a very specific vision of success," he said, studying his scotch. "Built a company, provided for my family, earned respect in my industry. When you chose a different path, I interpreted it as rejection of everything I valued." "It wasn't about rejecting your values," I said. "It was about finding my own." "I see that now." He looked up. "Blake pulled me aside after your inspection. Told me things about your reputation in certain circles. Things a father should have known about his son. Most of what I do isn't public information. But I never created space for you to share what you could." He rotated his glass slowly. "I was too busy telling you what you should be doing to listen to what you were actually doing." The admission surprised me. My father rarely acknowledged mistakes. "Did you know," he continued, "that Mitchell Defense has supplied equipment for 3 operations your teams have been involved with?" Blake told me. "We've been connected professionally all this time without me realizing it." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Garrett. Not because of your rank, or because Blake respects you, but because you found your own path and excelled on your own terms." He cleared his throat. I should have seen that sooner. It was perhaps the most genuine conversation we'd ever had. Not complete healing, but a step toward authentic understanding. My mother's reconciliation attempt came in her own style, A tearful lunch where she alternated between apologies and subtle inquiries about which of her friends might be impressed by various details of my career. It was imperfect, constrained by her worldview, but sincere within those limitations. "I always worried about you," she admitted. "When you chose the military instead of college, I imagined you in constant danger, throwing away your potential. I created a narrative where you were struggling because I couldn't imagine success outside the path I understood. I know, Mom. I should have trusted you more." She dabbed at her eyes. "Can you forgive me?" Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a single moment but a process, complicated, non-linear, ongoing. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "We all are." Preston's moment came unexpectedly during a family dinner. He had been unusually quiet, watching our parents' attempts at reconciliation with a calculating expression. "I've been thinking about something," he said during dessert. "All these years, I've been following Dad's path, measuring success by his metrics. Garrett created his own definition. I'm not sure which of us showed more independence. The observation revealed a surprising self-awareness. My brother was reevaluating not just his understanding of me but his own choices as well. As these tentative new connections formed, I maintained professional boundaries. I continued therapy sessions that had helped me process family dynamics long before the recent revelations. My therapist, Dr. Harris, provided valuable perspective. "They're seeing you clearly for the first time," she noted. "But remember, their reaction is still filtered through their own worldview. Your mother sees status. Your father sees professional respect. Preston sees competitive recalibration. Only Lindsay seems to see you as a whole person. So what's the path forward?" I asked. "Measured engagement with appropriate boundaries," she suggested. "Allow for healing without expecting perfection. They're working with decades of established patterns. This balanced approach served me well when deployment orders arrived, a 6-month assignment that would require departure in 3 weeks. The timing created a deadline for family decisions. How much reconnection was possible before geographic separation imposed its own limitations? I chose to share the news at our next family dinner, watching their reactions carefully. "Deployed?" my mother repeated, her expression falling. "But we've just started to get to know you again. That's the nature of military service, Mom. It comes with the job you're now so proud of." My father, ever practical, focused on logistics. "Where? When? What kind of communication will be possible?" "I can't share location details. 3 weeks from Thursday. Email access will be intermittent." Lindsay reached over to squeeze my hand. "We'll be here when you get back, with a better understanding of who you are." The final dinner before my deployment carried echoes of the fateful meal where they had laughed at my perceived mediocrity, but with crucial differences. Same dining room, same china, but fundamentally altered awareness. My father stood to offer a toast, crystal glass catching the light. "To Garrett, a son who found his own path to excellence. We're proud of your service and will be waiting for your safe return." The words were simple but sincere, acknowledgement rather than the dismissal of our previous gathering. When my turn came to speak, I chose my words carefully. Family is complicated. We see each other through lenses shaped by our own experiences and expectations. Sometimes those lenses distort rather than clarify. These past weeks have been about adjusting focus, not just yours about me, but mine about all of you as well. I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. I don't know what our family will look like when I return, but I'm willing to continue the work of seeing each other more clearly, with fewer assumptions and more curiosity. It wasn't complete resolution. That would require more time, more conversations, more evidence of sustained change. But it was a foundation built on something more substantial than my parents' revised assessment of my status or Preston's competitive recalibration. As I prepared for deployment, I shared as much of my life as security clearances permitted, introducing them to military friends at a casual gathering, explaining my apartment's minimalist aesthetic. Discussing the parts of my work that weren't classified. Small windows into a life they had previously ignored or dismissed. The night before departure, Lindsay called. I just wanted to say I love you, big brother. Not Colonel Mitchell. Not the newly discovered family success story. Just you. Her words captured what I hoped might eventually be possible with the rest of the family. Connection based on who I actually was rather than what I had achieved or how it reflected on them. As I packed my bags, I realized I had reached a place of relative peace. My family's validation, so desperately wanted in my youth, was no longer essential to my sense of self. Their recent recognition was welcome but not defining. I had built an identity independent of their approval, and paradoxically, that independence had created the possibility for more authentic connection. The path forward remained uncertain, but for the first time, it held potential for relationships based on reality rather than projections and assumptions. That possibility, however fragile, was worth nurturing. 6 months later, I returned to American soil with the familiar mixture of exhaustion and relief that follows extended deployment. The details of the operation remained classified. But the mission had been successful despite significant challenges. As I collected my bags at Andrews Air Force Base, I was surprised to see Lindsay waiting in the family reception area. Welcome home, Colonel Brother. She grinned, pulling me into a hug. Hope you don't mind the welcome committee. How did you even know when I'd arrive? I have my sources, she said mysteriously, then laughed. Actually, your friend Major Wilson called me. Said you might appreciate a familiar face. It was a thoughtful gesture from both Wilson and my sister. As we drove toward Arlington, Lindsay updated me on family developments. Dad's changed, she said, keeping her eyes on the road. Not completely, that would be asking for miracles, but significantly. He stepped back from day-to-day operations at Mitchell Defense. Says he wants to reassess priorities before his next chapter. This was unexpected. Raymond Mitchell's identity had always been inextricably linked to his company. What prompted that? He won't say specifically. But I think seeing you, someone who defines success differently, made him question his own metrics. She changed lanes smoothly. He's been reading books on military history. I think he's trying to understand your world. My mother had undergone her own evolution, according to Lindsay. The initial status-seeking behavior had gradually given way to something more genuine. She joined a support group for military families, Lindsay revealed. Said she had 14 years of catching up to do in understanding what military service really means. Preston's adjustment had been the most complicated. He struggled with the family narrative shift. Lindsay explained. When you were the underachiever, it made his conventional success more significant. With that dynamic disrupted, he's had to reconsider how he measures his own worth. That sounds uncomfortable but necessary, I observed. Exactly. He's seeing a career coach about whether he actually wants to run Mitchell Defense, or if he's just following the expected path. It's the first time I've seen him question the plan. As Lindsay pulled up to my apartment building, she turned to face me. They're all really trying, Garrett. Not perfectly, but sincerely. I appreciate the update. Gives me time to process before seeing everyone. They wanted to be here today, but I suggested giving you space to decompress first. Family dinner is scheduled for Sunday, if you're up for it. The consideration behind this approach wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, they would have descended en masse, prioritizing their desire for reconnection over my need for transition time. Sunday dinner revealed the changes Lindsay had described. My father, usually dominant in family gatherings, was more measured, asking questions and actually listening to answers. My mother still occasionally slipped into status consciousness but caught herself more often than not. Preston seemed less competitive, more contemplative. As we settled into the familiar dining room, my father cleared his throat. Your deployment, the parts you can share, was it successful? It was, I confirmed. challenging but successful. I've been reading about military leadership, he offered, trying to understand the context you operate in. It's different from corporate leadership in significant ways. Both have their challenges, I acknowledged, appreciating his effort to connect. My mother, setting down her wineglass, spoke with uncharacteristic directness. The military family group has been eye-opening. The sacrifices service members and their families make, I never truly understood before. I'm sorry for that, Garrett. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. Preston, who had been quietly observing, finally joined the conversation. I've been thinking about our different paths. For years, I measured success by Dad's standards, financial achievement, corporate advancement. I never questioned whether those metrics actually mattered to me personally. And now? I prompted. I'm not sure yet, he admitted. But I'm asking questions I should have asked years ago. Lindsay smiled at me across the table. Told you they've changed. The transformation wasn't complete. True change rarely is. Throughout dinner, I observed moments where old patterns briefly surfaced. My mother's reflexive reference to a friend's son who, only, made partner at his law firm. My father's instinctive business analysis of every topic. Preston's competitive comparison of our different leadership challenges. But each slip was followed by visible self-correction, awareness of the pattern and effort to adjust. The family dynamics that had once seemed immutable were now revealed as malleable, capable of evolution if not complete transformation. After dinner, my father invited me to join him on the back porch, a place where we had rarely had meaningful conversations in the past. Your deployment got me thinking about time, he said, looking out at the carefully landscaped yard. I've spent 40 years building Mitchell defense. Defined myself entirely by its success. Never questioned whether that was sufficient. He turned to face me. Watching you create a meaningful life completely outside my expectations, it forced me to reconsider some fundamental assumptions. That sounds like important work, I said. Uncomfortable work, he corrected with a rueful smile. But necessary. He paused. I'm proud of you, Garrett. Not because of your rank or position, but because you had the courage to define success on your own terms. That takes more integrity than following a predetermined path. Coming from my father. This represented a seismic shift in perspective. The man who had once dismissed my military career as playing soldier was now acknowledging the validity, even the integrity, of my chosen path. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I reflected on the journey our family had traveled. The painful revelation at Mitchell Defense had catalyzed change. But the real work had happened in the months that followed. The difficult conversations, the willingness to examine long-held assumptions, the gradual construction of more authentic relationships. The damage done by years of typecasting couldn't be undone in 6 months. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But the foundation had shifted from performance and expectation to something approaching genuine understanding. My therapist had provided a useful framework during our post-deployment session. Family healing isn't a destination but an ongoing process, she reminded me. The question isn't whether perfect understanding has been achieved, but whether everyone is committed to continuing the work. By that measure, our family was making progress. Imperfect, inconsistent progress, but movement nonetheless. In the weeks that followed, I maintained the boundaries that therapy had helped me establish, declining some invitations, accepting others. Sharing what I could about my life while protecting my professional obligations and personal space. I began mentoring a young lieutenant who was navigating family disapproval of his military career. Offering perspective I wished I'd had years earlier. The final family dinner before my next assignment revealed how far we had come and how far we had yet to go. The old dynamics occasionally surfaced, but now they were recognized rather than reinforced. My parents made genuine efforts to know me as I actually was rather than as they had imagined me to be. Preston and I were developing a relationship based on mutual respect rather than comparison. Lindsay continued to be the emotional bridge, helping translate between different family communication styles. As we said our goodbyes, my mother hugged me tightly. "I spent so many years worried about the wrong things," she whispered. "I'm sorry I miss seeing who you really are." My father's handshake was firm, his expression reflective. "Safe travels, son. We'll be here when you return." Preston's goodbye was characteristically brief but sincere. "Take care out there, Colonel." Lindsay walked me to my car. "There's still works in progress," she said, glancing back at the house. "We all are. Progress is enough," I replied, and meant it. The journey from that painful dinner where they had laughed at my perceived mediocrity to this moment of genuine connection had been neither straightforward nor easy. It had required painful honesty, willingness to be vulnerable, and the courage to forge new patterns in relationships long defined by rigid expectations. I had learned that being underestimated can sometimes be a gift, allowing you to define yourself by your own standards rather than others' expectations. That family narratives, however entrenched, can evolve when confronted with reality. That healing doesn't require perfection, just persistent effort and good faith. Most importantly, I had discovered that true freedom comes not from external validation but from internal authenticity, the courage to follow your own path even when others can't yet appreciate its value. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt neither triumph nor resentment, but something more nuanced: gratitude for the progress made, acceptance of the limitations that remained, and hope for the continuing journey of mutual understanding. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated by family or friends, only to prove them wrong later? Or have you had to recalibrate your understanding of someone close to you? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, growth, and finding your own path. Thank you for joining me today. And remember that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply becoming the person you know you can be, regardless of others' expectations.